Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Faye, I am the Chronic Crafter and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator based in the UK. In today's video, I wanted to talk about embossing versus embossing. There are two types of embossing that you may have seen used online on other people's cards. The first is sometimes referred to dry embossing and uses something called an embossing folder to create a almost 3D effect on a piece of cardstock. The second technique is known as heat embossing. This uses a special type of sticky ink and heat embossing powder and creates a lovely shiny image based off a stamped image. Heat embossing is one of my favourite crafty techniques. Here I have some metallic silver powder and I absolutely love how that has that bit of shimmer and shine to it. I do use both techniques very regularly in my craft room and I wanted to show you the difference. I have two identical cardstock panels here. These are the two-tone cardstock from Stampin' Up! In the shade Bubble Bath, which is a beautiful pale pink. And I wanted to use these identical panels to show you the two techniques and make some cards. So firstly, I'm going to use an embossing folder. This is the mini corrugated 3D embossing folder. What it means by 3D is it would create a deeper effect, so to speak, than a non-3D embossing folder. And this one is corrugated, so it's just lines, but I think it's absolutely lovely. And this is a mini folder, so it is a square size rather than a larger folder, which is A5 in size. To use an embossing folder, you will need a die cutting machine, and the embossing folder will run through with a different combination of plates. So if you've got a die cutting machine, you will be able to use this technique. I'm going to use the pale side of my cardstock, I think. So all I'm going to do is open up my embossing folder, place my card inside, and I do want it to have straight lines. Pop that inside like that, and then close up the embossing folder and create the plate combination to run it through my die cutting machine. Sometimes you may find that you have to use an extra piece of cardstock called a shim. It will depend on your individual die cutting machine and the plate configuration that you have. Please see the instructions that are on your die cutting machine for this. I have some pieces of card that are scrap that I use just to add a little bit extra thickness when I need. It's also worth noting that if you are to use an embossing folder, you want to make sure that you're putting it through with your closed edge in the direction of your machine. If you go with your open edge, sometimes this can cause issues. So always remember, closed edge goes first. And now I'm just going to run this through my machine. So there we go. I have run this through my machine with one plate and three thin cardboard shims. You may find that you get a different or better result on your machine with a different combination of shims, so do play around. You can't really see the texture on this light side, but I love how that has worked out on the darker side of the cardstock. So I hope you can see that there. And because I've only used one plate through my machine, I've got a relatively thin impression, you could definitely use a second plate and get these ridges to be deeper. You can really see at this angle how they've been embossed on there. So you have the emboss and the deboss, and that refers to the two sides, the two sections, how you've got the pieces that dip in and the pieces that stick out. So if it's a section that dips in, it's called your deboss, and if it's a section that sticks out, it's called your emboss. So I'm just going to put my folder and plates to one side. The second embossing technique is heat embossing, and this really is one of my favourite crafty techniques. So I'm using the Thankful Garden stamp set and this gorgeous flower, and I'm going to stamp this with clear embossing powder and then go over the top with my metallic silver powder. It's always worthwhile having some scrap paper to hand whenever you do heat embossing, as you don't want your powder to go absolutely everywhere. I will also be using a stamping platform to stamp this image, because when you're heat embossing, a really good tip is to stamp your image twice. If you stamp your image twice, you get a good coverage of ink and it improves the look of the image once you've added your heat embossing powder. So I'll be using a stamping platform. Another great tip for heat embossing is to use an anti-static bag on the panel you will be heat embossing before you stamp. Embossing powder sticks to three things. It sticks to any dampness on the page, any oil from your finger. It sticks to static, and it sticks to embossing ink or pigment ink. So we want to remove any additional static from our paper. I will then go in with my clear embossing powder ink, stamp up my image with a nice juicy ink pad. If your ink pad isn't feeling particularly sticky, then you can buy refills. And then I'm going to stamp this on here. I have this stamping puck which I use on my stamp platform and would really recommend one of these. It's been very handy for me to have. I'm just going to lift that up from there, and I can see, you might not be able to see on camera, but I can see where my image has been stamped, and I am going to go in once more with some more ink. I will ink up my stamp again just to make sure I get good coverage on my image. And then again, I will stamp that down. And this is why you would use a stamping platform, because it means my image is being stamped in exactly the same place. Nice, firm, even pressure to stamp this down. And then when I take this off here and take this panel off, I will bring in my scrap paper and go in with my silver embossing powder. Sprinkle that over there and then tap my excess powder onto my scrap paper. And I am left with my image being visible. I'm going to pop that to one side. Always put the powder back in your pot and the lid back on your pot straight away to avoid any accidents. Pop the lid back on there. And now I'm going to use a heat tool to heat this image. And that is where the magic truly happens. We've gone from having a dull powder to this absolutely gorgeous silver metallic shine. I think I've missed a little bit on one of these petals. I'll just go in and make sure that's heated. And there we go. So that is what heat embossing looks like. So we've had two identical plain pink panels, and we have then done dry embossing with our die cutting machine through one and heat embossing through the other. So let me know in the comments what your favourite technique was. I'd love to know. I try not to be biased, but heat embossing does win for me. But I'd love to know what your favourite technique in your craft room is, so please let me know. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Bye!